Hello, my name is Erek Slater. I'm a CTA bus operator for 12 years now. I'm also an executive board member for ATU Local 241. Many of my coworkers asked me about the upcoming ratification vote in February 8th for the tentative agreement. I'm going to try to put out some thoughts here quickly and have hopefully an earnest discussion about our options. We had an emergency meeting at Local 241 of the executive board on January 17th. We received a 6-page summary of the tentative agreement. And things have happened pretty quickly since then. I'm going to go over a few things and then have a further discussion about the actual TA briefly. I was very encouraged by the combined 308-241 membership meeting over at the Chicago Teachers Union. Very deep discussion, many different job classifications, workers with different job classifications brought up their issues, and I believe we really learned a lot from each other. I hope we do that more. On January 31st, we had another executive board meeting for 241, and we got a brief chance to look at the actual tentative agreement, or a 42-page document in memorandums of understanding. And part of what I'm going to do here is just discuss a little bit of the differences I saw. I'm briefly looking at it here. I don't have the document. It was retrieved, so I don't have the exact documents. I'm trying to do this from memory. So if I make a mistake, I really ask that you send an email over to transitworkersunite at gmail.com, or you can also send it to my union email address at the end of this video. Just tell us what the correction should be, and we'll try to fix it as soon as possible. So things have moved fast. This is a complex agreement, and it deals with perhaps 15,000 families, working families, and really that's worth billions of dollars to the ruling class of Chicago. Certainly many hundreds of millions of dollars in just pay alone on pension. So we should take a serious discussion about this, and that's what I'm trying to do, what we're trying to do with this video. So since the contract offer was made by our employer, they made that on the exact same date as binding interest arbitration was invoked, or was about to. So they basically said to our union negotiators, take this or leave it, this is their last and best offer. And our union delegations came back to our boards and to our membership, and now we're discussing this. So it looks like we have two options. One is to ratify the contract that the CTA has offered to us, or to submit our contract proposals to a binding interest arbitration. But I would like to also discuss in this video a third option, and briefly discuss it, which is vote down the contract, respectfully request our union negotiating teams to exit arbitration, to make that very public, that this is a trap and this doesn't help our families and the city of Chicago to force us into arbitration, and then earnestly begin a 6 or 12-month contract campaign and a strike campaign. Take it very seriously, and to come back to the membership with a good contract or a better contract, and for us to be able to vote on it, to ratify it. So here we go. Option number one, vote yes on the contract. So first of all, I want to say we definitely deserve a raise. We move Chicago, and we do it very well. We're leaders of families, we're leaders of communities, we're leaders at our workplace. We do a darn good job. Our work is very complex. It is extremely dangerous. We definitely deserve a raise. I would say that for me personally, and I think I've heard from many of my coworkers, that the prospect of getting some much needed cash and retro pay up front is definitely having me fighting the urge of thinking about which bills I'm going to pay off. I'm fighting that urge to try to think through, and I'm asking everyone to try to do that as well. I have 3 young children at home. This cash could really help very quickly, and I know many people are also in that situation. And of course, CTA knows this, and they're kind of dangling it in front of us. Let's make sure we know exactly what we're doing when we're voting on this. So I basically wait not so fast. what is the CTA up to? If this is in fact a CTA proposal, what are they up to? Especially people who've been here more than a few years. We've seen some pretty nasty stuff they've done to us. Just a few years ago in 2012, a very similar situation. We had a tentative agreement brought back for ratification. It was quick. It was only like a week that we knew about it. And we found out that, yeah, we got a little bit of retro pay, but we had massive decreases in our health insurance, which not only harmed our paycheck, it also harmed our families because we weren't going to the hospital. We were, our health deteriorated. And that was clearly orchestrated by the CTA, and so is this, this tentative agreement. Now, the other thing going on here is our unions and our coworkers, our families, were really massively disrespected in this whole process. It's been over 2 years. We've been out of contract. I believe it's over 35 meetings between our negotiating teams and the Chicago Transit Authority, and they didn't even bother to give have their president show up to the meetings. It was just wasting our time, and then they led us along saying, okay, we're going to give you this. No, we're not. Then we're going to give you arbitration. And then at the very last minute, they say, here, this is what you're going to get. Take it or leave it. The other thing they did is they really demanded unfairly that our leadership sign a gag order or a non-disclosure agreement. And that's really wrong. It puts us in a straitjacket. It's like going to a knife fight and you know, forcing one person to be in a straitjacket. You can't actually go to the working class communities and say, this is what they're doing to us. This is what they're threatening, and it's wrong. Or bringing your proposals out publicly. And the other thing, it makes it more difficult for us to unify and organize and fight as a collective union if we cannot communicate with our own members, right? We can't talk about what's being discussed behind closed doors. So I want to say a few things about what I briefly saw in the actual documents versus what we saw with the 6-page summary. Some of the language, what we've seen in the summary is, for health insurance, I believe is dangerous. It's not clear for many people, including me, exactly what they're up to. They're going to increase our health insurance costs, but they're going to give us some kind of voucher. And at the end of this agreement, or perhaps a bit afterwards, they're going to potentially remove this voucher. What are they exactly up to? Now, when I briefly saw the memorandum of understanding, which was put forward by the authority, it was a 4-paragraph document, very complex. All of us, it's not so hard for us to simply put this online and let all the members take a look at it, look at all the words and ands and ors, all those things really matter, and before we get to vote. I'm concerned about the language being put in for part-timers. It's tough enough to be a part-timer right now, a part-time worker. They appear to be taking away potentially our 2 days off. I'm concerned that we may not be able to pick or make a selection. That's not clear. This language is not helpful to us whatsoever. It shouldn't be in the contract if it's not helping us. That's what the point of the contract is to get stuff that we need and we want, not something that the employer is going to harm us with. The last sentence of the last paragraph on the summary is, it says, its wording is incorrect. It says that officers, it sounds like it makes some sense that the union has to tell the employer that which officers can be on the property, and if they are not on this list, that they can be removed by the police. But instead, it's not officers, it's actually any elected officials when I looked at that. And I'm concerned that that may be used by the employer to interfere in our union. We've seen that historically. I'm also concerned about the potential possibility of reopening the contract during the contract to possibly harm pensioners. And that hasn't been sufficiently made clear to me and many others. Okay, so those are some of the specifics that I've been able to see as a board member in writing quickly. Some basic fundamental problems I see with the tentative agreement. One, so this was a negotiated agreement between our union officers and a CTA top management. This was not a result of a contract fight. Yes, we did some actions, but it was not the company saying, "Uncle, please, no more, and we're going to give you these things." No, this was really their orchestrated action. fundamentally, signing a contract is a peace agreement. It's saying that this is a 4-year agreement, 2 years in the past, 2 years in the future, that for those 2 years in the future, we will not strike. It's basically a promise. It's much more difficult for us to take strike action and other actions if we are under contract, legally and otherwise. We can't do it. So if we're saying peace and we're getting a little bit of cash, the war is going to continue. Remember, much of what we are affected by is not just money. It's health payments for retirees and others. It's the actual working conditions we face. That is getting worse, and there's no real resolution of that in this contract. And they're saying basically, shut up. And they're going to say, you voted for it. So taking this bribe has also some disadvantages, long-term and short-term, for our internal and also our public position as unions, our union, and also for us and our families. The city administration may burn us for selling out the lower-paid workers, the second chance workers. Remember, both unions voted against the daily second chance program. Remove it. They ignored us. Now they're giving us some cash and saying, we're going to force it into your contract. There's nothing you can do about it. It's a really disrespectful thing they're doing to us. They disrespect our organizations. They disrespect us. And furthermore, they disrespect these super exploited workers, which should be paid the same amount as anybody else doing this work. The part-time workers, there's no resolution to the problems of part-time work. The CSAs, the customer service agents, being paid half as much. No health insurance, part-time work. This is really not being resolved at all in this contract. By spurning these workers, they're actively splitting us. The other group, I would say, certainly is the maintenance workers in 241. I mean, imagine you have been organizing and fighting for 7, 10 years to get parity just with the guy next to you who's doing the same exact work but getting 13 bucks an hour more. And you're angry and frustrated, you're ready to go, and all of a sudden they're saying, you know what, too bad, you're just getting a 1% raise, compounded. So that may split our union. It is splitting our union, that's intentional. And that makes it more difficult for us to fight in the future. So the other thing is, they just raised the fare for the passengers. Now they're going into budget discussions. Now, we know what they're going to do. They're going to talk about how these greedy bus operators and combined rail operators are making all this money, and these poor people on the street can't get nothing. And they're going to try to cut the service, make us go faster and more dangerously down the street or down the rail. Then they're going to try to take this budget out on our backs, and they're going to blame us. And we're going to be in a more difficult situation if we sign this to be able to fight that out publicly and politically. And we're going to be continued, and that's going to lead to violence against us, right? Especially the frontline workers. More of us are going to be shouted at, called names, spit at, and beaten up, threatened, etc. Really, and this is a direct relation to this. They're basically telling us, shut up, take this abuse, you're paid for it, wait until your next contract. So. This option number 2, quickly. Arbitration. I understand that especially some of the maintenance workers have seen this as a legitimate option to try to get parity between wages of someone next door, but I have 2 major problems with arbitration. One is it's a blank check. It's a blank signed check in which you're handling to some jerk, some lawyer that's going to make a decision for all 15,000 of our lives. That person can be threatened, it can be bought off, it can just be a jerk. The other major problem is, and that could be massive problems. We've seen that historically. Arbitrators are a major concern. The other problem is a principled one. We don't get to vote on it. It's taking away our agency, our rights, and the wisdom, the knowledge, the experience of 15,000 families is taken out of the picture. We can no longer vote. Okay, so option number 3. Option number 3 is to vote it down, to respectfully ask our negotiating team, our officers, to retract from arbitration. It takes 2 to tango, right? You can't just have one side coming in. Both sides need to participate in this process. Make this very public. Let people know the trap of arbitration. Even if they may have the laws on their side, we can win the public to our side. So those two things: stop arbitration, vote it down. But the main thing is to go on a contract campaign. That's what unions have been doing for 150 years. You go and you make it clear what your needs are, and then you make those demands, and you say, if we don't get these demands by this date, then you don't work. So one, I was so encouraged by the 308-241 combined mass membership meeting. We should do that every month until we get a good contract. It was such a good discussion. We learned so much from each other. We bonded, and that scares the heck out of the CTA and the city administration when we're united or beginning to unite. Two, hold regular, open to all ranks, and even community allies, contract strike campaign committees between both locals. Have them regularly, every 2 weeks, every month, maybe even more than that if it gets close to a strike. Talk tactics, talk strategy. What are we actually going to do? Are we going to do a sick out? Are we going to do a standard operating procedure job? Are we going to take a day? Are we going to have a full strike? All the tactics and so on, the ranks, the people who actually get affected by a strike should be participating directly, repeatedly in this decision making. You can really have no successful job actions or contract campaigns unless you have that committee of the ranks. Three, agree on a short list of contract demands and make them very public. Make it clear to the public that the people being affected, this is the reasons why. They're legitimate, they're moral reasons, and that they should support us in our power. So one of the main things may be equal pay for equal work. There should not be this huge disparity of work. It's wrong, and most people agree with that. In my opinion, part-time work should be ended. We'll just discuss this out. If you don't, you have the same uniform, you do the same work, it's actually much harder, except you just get the tiny bit of protections in the contract. And the rest, especially the bus operators, get this huge section. And all the part-timers get this in there. We're really disrespected, and it's very dangerous for our families. We all should be full-time. This is a full-time job. If you want to work less hours, okay. We should have those rights to work less hours. Have personal days. Much of the problem is not just money. It's being able to take care of our family emergencies. Most of us have a family. Most of the public agree with this. You're on the bus and the train, you're going to get all these germs, and you're going to give germs to the public. It's dangerous. How could they give us discipline? I have no problem with the sick book, but in addition, have personal days. This is something I think we could win in the working class communities. We can make this political argument and use our strike power to back it up. And of course, so pay parity between the different classifications. Again, CSAs, maintenance workers, daily second chance, maintenance workers, part-time workers. Go on a 6 to 12 month strike contract campaign. It's a campaign. You don't just do it like this. You can't just win the public over by having one press conference or one action. You've got to practice and learn, take actions, come back, study, and think about it again and again and again. It's a campaign. It's like a military thing. But take it really. Set a date. Set a date for 6 months, a year or so. Make it very public. If we do not get these 5 or 7 demands, these community demands, these things for public transportation, for our families, for our proper working conditions, then the buses and trains won't move. Just make it very clear. They can write all the laws they want. If we make that clear to the public, we win it, we can do it. So, the main things I'll just finish on. There's an iron law in contract negotiations for hundreds of years, which is you get what you fight for. And this was clearly a company CTA engineered contract. Vote yes or no for it, but understand that there are other options. There are options to get something better for us and not to divide our unions and disrespect our families. We can go on a community campaign to win support for a legitimate job action and actually do it successfully. We can bring back a good contract. Let's do it.